Cheers. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Trip Stories. In today's video, we're going to be checking out something a little bit different. This is a trip report posted on Erowid entitled Not My Silver Bullet by a user named Anatoly Smorin, and it was actually posted only a few days ago, 3 days ago. It's a very detailed report about microdosing LSD over a 30-day period. Incredibly descriptive. You can really tell that this user knows what he's talking about. So yeah, let's just get into it. LSD, Not My Silver Bullet. This report is part of an 8-report collection. The collection consists of a summary report that is retrospective and generalized in nature, as well as 7, of which this is one, more detailed chronicles of my experiences with various chemicals used intentionally for work or study enhancement. Each report documents a single substance used for 30 days. The idea was to give each material a chance to show its strengths and weaknesses. The summary report has shorter descriptions and comparisons of my experiences with each material, as well as links to the other full-length experience reports for each substance. So, first off, very, very cool that this guy did that. And I already skimmed through this one, and I can tell that he knows what he's talking about. And like I said, it's very refreshing to see. So, let's just keep going. I'm going to talk as little as I can, but I might comment here and there. But there's a lot to get through here, so let's just keep it going. I consider myself to be well versed in the realm of substance use. Previous experiences include opiates, stimulants, and psychedelics spanning over more than a decade. A fair amount of my substance usage history includes novel research chemicals, often in less than common combinations. The LSD used in my experimenting was sourced from a respectable vendor in the same batch from which I had tried previously in small, medium, and large dosages. I trusted the 255 micrograms per tab I began with. I dropped one blotter into 35 milliliters of agave-based ethanol, 40% ABV. This was stirred and shaken every 30 minutes for the first 5 hours, then left overnight until the morning when the same agitation schedule was resumed for the 2 hours prior to the first ingestion. The resulting solution was 7.3 UG or milliliters of LSD. All of the volumetric processes were performed with clean and freshly calibrated syringes. Interesting. So it's 7.3 UG per milliliter. I'm assuming is the correct way to read that. It should be noted that all of the LSD dosages were administered orally. I did not hold the liquid in my mouth at all before swallowing. I did not have any tolerance to LSD coming into the beginning of my month of using the substance. This report was written using extensive notes as well as audio recordings taken during the experience. My history of using LSD is substantial. Over more than a decade, I've explored the substance from truly imperceptible per microdosing all the way up to galaxy-destroying megadoses. I'm sorry I'm not reading well right now. I'm like the screen... I have the words very much larger than I've had in the past. Sorry. I began my month of LSD on the cusp between microdoses and mini doses. To clarify the difference, to me, a microdose is one that is too small to allow any discernible effects to be detected. A mini dose is the smallest dosages at which I feel threshold effects. I think that is very, very important. To me, is important, but also this description of what a microdose is technically, I believe, what it's supposed to be, but people treat what this guy's calling a mini dose as a microdose, where you're actually feeling something. But in my knowledge, to my knowledge, like he's saying, a microdose is one that is too small to allow any discernible effects to be detected. A mini dose is the smallest dosages at which I feel threshold effects. So that right there is something to definitely keep in mind. As I progressed through my program of LSD, I found my sweet spot dosage to be firmly on the mini dose side of the fence. Several months prior to my documented 30 days, I played around to narrow my ideal dosage range. During the preseason, I could not find anything positive resulting from microdosing. Like taking a daily vitamin, it might have been good for me, but I didn't notice it correlating to enhanced performance in any form whatsoever. It was easy to decide that what I was searching for was a tangible boost in my mental abilities during both work and non-work activities. In a similar fashion, I ruled out dosages above 20 micrograms. These became too intense, particularly during the peak of the experiences, to be appropriated for the variety of work scenarios that might arise. So here is a timeline of his dosages. My ingestion schedule was as follows. So it goes day 1 through 30 and details the exact amount of micrograms, when he took days off, and I'll kind of skim through here. Day 7, third off day in a row, Sunday, and I forgot to dose. So it looks like he did a little bit more because he forgot that second day or that third day. And then just took like 4 days off to, interesting month. But yeah, I'll go from the beginning if you guys want to go through real quick. All right. While the onset, duration, and intensity varied depending on dosage, what I had eaten that day, my mood, and a myriad of other factors, I constructed the summary below to describe when I felt certain types of effects on an average day. So this is kind of like his interpretation of what like an average day. So this is going to come off like it's one experience, but really what he's doing is he's taking all his experiences from all those 30 days and kind of describing what an average day would be like from all those experiences. So taking the LSD, pretty straightforward. This is when the dose was swallowed. After about 15 to 40 minutes, during this time span, I typically felt the first alerts of the substance. Generally, this presented as a light, bristling, or tingling sensation on the inside of my scalp. Often, this physical hint was accompanied by a light influx of mental energy and a minor but noticeable increase in color saturation. I typically didn't find any increased mental abilities in the realms of focus or creativity at this point. I love this, dude. I just love how well it's written. About an hour to 3 hours. This is when the LSD would really settle in and present the most pleasant and productive effects. I found that with these mini doses, I didn't distinguish significant differences throughout this time frame. Until the peak was reached, this stretch of the experiences typically felt the same. The same was good. Mathematical and data-related knots untied themselves like a properly rolled ball of yarn, rather than the tangled mess they might have appeared as if I was sober. Roadblocks several steps ahead of my current progress on work tasks presented themselves more clearly and sooner than normal, allowing swifter and more elegant solutions to complex data analysis challenges. I generally sat up a little more straight, was always on the verge of cracking a smile, and was excited rather than dreadful when work-related email or message alerts blinked on my screen. Very interesting. That's awesome. I just love that. About 3 hours to 4.5 hours. Challenges sometimes arose during this section of the experience timeline, when the LSD was at peak intensity. On several occasions, I experienced slight anxiety here. Concern would fester if I received surprise requests for my attendance to a meeting. I felt the swelling effects and worried they would continue to progress to an uncontrollable trip. Despite knowing this would not happen, given my controlled and rationalized dosages, I was always glad when I passed through this phase of the experience and could detect the beginning of the decline. 4 hours to 6 hours. As the intensity started to descend, I felt relief. The worry of overdoing my dosage, however irrational, disappeared and led me back into a state expanded creativity, imagination, and resourcefulness. Similar to the come up, I didn't differentiate between the beginning of the come down and its midsection. 5 hours to 7 hours. This is the real beginning of the end. Positive effects dwindle considerably at the beginning of this time range, and towards the end, I usually would struggle to discern off baseline from sobriety. 7 hours. At this point, I'm usually beginning to become tired. The energy of the LSD is all but gone, and if I have a lot of work left to do, I might be tempted to have a cup of coffee or at least take a brisk walk to try and ignite a second wind. On the Shulgin rating scale, I'd be dwindling below a plus for sure. A plus minus for sure. Expectations, hopes, and concerns going in. So I just want to say, first off, I want to comment on that real quick. This entire timeline is beautiful. I love it. I think that even the moment where he talks about how it becomes a little bit the paranoia kicks in and it becomes a little wild or like a little anxiety ridden. I kind of like that. I think that a controlled anxiety like that once a few days or whatever might be good for you. I know that's weird to say, but I really do feel like there are some anxieties and some paranoias that we feel rightfully so. And, it ends up being a benefit for us. But I don't want to get too much into that. Either way, I love that timeline. Yeah. Expectations, hopes, and concerns going in. I was hoping to break up some of the monotony and mitigate the short-temperedness that I've been experiencing at work lately. I thought I might benefit from some additional energy as well. There are a lot of accounts that credit microdosing for increased creativity. This wasn't something I was expecting to occur for myself. The only concerns I had were centered around the potential of being too intoxicated, too confused and mentally scattered during the workday to comfortably function. More favorite aspects. Hands down, the positivity, which became an obvious trend early on in the mini dosing trials, was in the front runner among the reasons why I enjoyed using LSD during work. Amidst my experimentation, I didn't find that the LSD amplified my natural emotions as it seems to do during more recreational excursions. To clarify this, the LSD in these mini doses was not just a mood magnifying glass. On larger doses, I found that LSD would sometimes make a good mood great, but also a bad mood calamitous. What a word. What a word this guy used. Thankfully, these relatively small doses for the month I documented only pushed me in a positive direction. Decent days rose up into markedly enjoyable days. On the flip side, frustrating co-workers suddenly didn't seem so frustrating. The LSD pushed me to not only be more patient in these scenarios, but to sometimes even find humor within the ludicrous high-pressure environments that can exist in corporate finance. My sober self can spiral in these types of situations, getting more and more upset over increasingly smaller items of frustration. This is one of my least favorite things about how my personality interacts with my work. Having the LSD combat my natural negative reactions on these days was wonderful. I tried to take mental photographs of these moments, write some things down in the hopes of bringing this ability back into my sober days. I never had much luck with these integration attempts. During the month of LSD dosing, I found myself far more often than usual stopping to admire a small beauty of everyday life. Dust particles dancing in a beam of sunlight, the crispness of the air when I took my dogs outside for a walk. Things that are easily glanced over, but when paid attention to are really quite beautiful. Even a quick glance out the window from my desk often rendered a sense of appreciation and wonder at the natural, charming elegance of the world. It should certainly be noted that the rose-tinted glasses effects were not silver bullet solutions that made work perfectly smooth and everything easy. They merely increased the appreciation and slowed me down a bit. By no means did the LSD cut away stress completely. A challenging day at the office would crush the quiet moments of admiration like a steel-toed boot stomping down upon the rose lenses spectacles. Least favorite aspects. I don't have many direct complaints about the LSD's effects during these mini dose days. The come down sometimes left me feeling a little bummed out from the fact that I seemed to use up all my increased abilities on work. During the day, I'd think about productive projects and hobbies, but by the time work ended, I'd be drained of energy. A non-dosed baseline for me can sometimes feel tired and exhausted from the day's mental exertion, but this is a special sort of weary. My physical brain itself felt tired and worn out, like the synapses and pathways have been working too hard. I rarely had a strong second wind on the LSD dose days during which I could be productive late into the night. Similarly, on work days that ran long, past 10 or 12 hours, my energy and motivation were completely tapped out by the end. This was more noticeable than if I had done the whole day sober. Even the small amounts of LSD seemed to negate the effects of alcohol. My typical evening beers didn't produce as much of the familiar relaxation and buzz on days I dosed. There was no decrease in desire to drink, only a diminished enjoyment when partaking. I'm really sorry about all the stuttering, guys. I'm just not doing well today. Neutral aspects / additional commentary. Despite my familiarity with LSD, adapting to being on the substance on a regular basis at work took some getting used to. There were instances when something would come up at like an unexpected interaction with a boss or a fire drill scenario, where I felt hindered by the LSD rather than aided. Typically, this would present itself as a slight dilation of time, and mild confusion, which were both unpleasant and when trying to recall the details of logic and decisions made in the past relating to complex data files. Even if the negatives were momentary, it made me question if the mellow benefits were worth it. The visual effects were very minimal. I'm going to just start that over. The visual effects were very minimal during my mini dosing days. Occasionally, I found myself admiring a shaft of sunlight sparkling with dust or some other natural beauty, pleasantly distracted. I never got to the point of breathing or patterning in my visual field. Some minor color saturation and visual noise were present during most dosages. My appetite was slightly suppressed on about half of my mini dose days. Unlike with a higher dosage, this effect only lasted until shortly after the peak of the day's intensity. I usually ate a light breakfast of fruit, yogurt, and granola within half an hour of my LSD ingestion, either before or after. I wouldn't feel hungry again until mid-afternoon, which was usually 5.5 hours after the trip or later. Excuse me. This delayed lunch schedule was unpleasant or inconvenient. I'm susceptible to getting angry when hungry, but this never happened while on the LSD. He just talks about his biometrics. So he lost 2 pounds, no big deal. Heart rate notes, nothing noteworthy, no slowing or hastening either on regular basis or during any singular incident. No sexual effects noted. No issues with sleeping. No changes in dreams. Mental effects. Creativity, absolutely boosted, particularly during the first few hours after ingestion. Interestingly, I did not achieve these boosted problem-solving abilities at the peak intensities of slightly smaller dosages. I had to reach the middle to high range of my mini dosing, and only then during the come-up did I unlock the ability to find unique solutions to complex problems that I think would have taken me longer to achieve without the LSD. Thinking multiple steps ahead and seeing upcoming roadblocks was regularly mentioned in my daily notes. You know what it seems like right now? Like what would taking a mini dose of LSD would be good in my life would be if I'm like going to a studio to record some music, or we're gonna make an album or whatever. Like doing that. This sounds like this would be the perfect moment to do that. You know, perfect setting. Focus. I can't say I got a high degree of enhanced laser focus during these months' trials. There was the occasional day where I felt sucked in, so a few hours would drift by and I was immersed in my work to the point that I was pleasantly surprised when I checked the clock. There wasn't any days where multiple hours passed and I'd have severely incorrectly guessed the passage of time like can happen on more classic recreational dosages. Nothing as far as social effects. There were a few instances where I felt confused, overwhelmed, and nervous about my intoxication. A pressure would build in my mind, an itch almost, one that couldn't be scratched. Struggling, unable to shake this unpleasant sensation would be distracting as I interacted with coworkers. It would typically become more manageable once the stressor of interacting with others was removed. But sometimes it lingered until the LSD's effects left me completely. These feelings were accompanied by the thought that I can make it through, but this is making my day more difficult. The juice didn't seem worth the squeeze. Moo effects. What's a moo effect? I chose to divide this section into portions of time because after reviewing my notes at the end of the month, the most distinct patterns of mood changes were correlated to specific timelines. The comments below held true for nearly all of the LSD dosage days. Mid-experience. Overall, a sheen of positivity. An elevated mood was present from the onset onwards through the majority of the experience. I felt more excited about taking on tasks and interacting with difficult coworkers. Every day seemed more like opportunities than a dreary to-do list. Come down. Towards the end of the workday, as the effects disappeared, I was almost always completely drained. I was more tired than I would have been if I'd gone through the day sober. This exhaustion was physical and mental. My normal evenings are often productive. I write, play pool, do chores, or any number of things that need to get done. On the LSD mini dose days, I found that I watched more Netflix, lounged around, and procrastinated far more often. Interesting. Off days, nothing crazy on the off days, it looks like. Month spent on LSD that falls under physical effects was a constant. It says the only common thread about the month spent on LSD that falls into the purview of physical effects was a constant thread in my commentary of catching a chill. My toes and fingers already suffered from poor circulation. This was exacerbated by the small dosages of LSD. A slightly heavier set of wool socks and a thicker, I don't even know that word, cameus? I probably know this word, shirt on those days were usually enough to eradicate the chills. So he talks about combinations when he did other things that included with the LSD. That's interesting. Let's check that out. Please keep in mind the below commentary is limited to the handful of interactions between my micro and mini doses of LSD. Most of the secondary substances were taken at least halfway through the experience of the primary substance LSD. Cannabis. I combined cannabis typically through an oil pen vaporizer in almost every stage of the LSD experiences at one point or another throughout the month. These cannabis dosages were always of a light variety, 2 to 5 medium-sized hits at a time. The addition of cannabis exponentiated all of the LSD's effects. Whatever I was feeling was expended upon. Good mood became an exhilarating rush. A creeping concern swelled into legitimate paranoia. Adding cannabis was a roll of the dice, but one I could usually control the outcome of by avoiding cannabis if I felt even the tiniest bit nervous around the edge. So that's normal. Alcohol. I did not enjoy this combination. I was not able to enjoy the sedating buzz of alcohol as much as I normally would. I could consume more booze than normal and feel the effects far less. Other than this, no notable synergies were found. Ketamine. On a few occasions, I used ketamine and or S-ketamine in the evenings of the mini-dose days. I didn't find any potentiation or interaction between the LSD and the ketamine. Essentially, it was not a combination when I did this. There was no difference compared to if I had done the ketamine entirely on its own. This guy is my hero. MDMA. Twice in this month, I ingested MDMA. One instance was a light dosage in the morning to accompany the LSD, and the other was a medium dosage taken for recreational purposes on a Friday evening of an on day. The smaller combination was 45 milligrams, which I insufflated just after swallowing the day's LSD. This intensified the LSD's effects, particularly and not surprisingly in the aspects of motivation and energy. The mental effects of the LSD, specifically confusion, were softened or pushed to the background by the positivity from the stimulant. I did not find significant desire to redose the MDMA or move in a more recreational direction as I might have with MDMA on its own. The larger dosage, 145 milligrams taken orally, was taken at about 11 hours after taking that LSD dose. I found no interaction between the two substances in this instance. The MDMA experience was far stronger than the LSD one, and once it began, any faint reminder of the LSD was erased. Outcome. I only had 2 instances where I felt the LSD was truly detrimental or uncomfortable. These were days that I pushed the dosage upward slightly, hoping for a lighter workload paired with increased effects. Unfortunately, things arose, and I was forced into some fast-paced emergency tasks around the peak of the substance effects. This was my own self-inflicted risk, gambling on the unpredictability of work. Looking back at the month of using LSD comprehensively, I found the material interesting, useful at times, but not the silver bullet and all be all that many other people report it to be. The magical moments where I recognized that I was zooming past roadblocks, solving logical mazes as though I had a key to all the shortcuts were seriously enlightening. This is what I imagined. In a perfect world, scheduled mini-dose LSD would be like every time, all the time. Unfortunately, these enlightened moments were not a regular occurrence. In fact, they were far from it. Not even once per day, perhaps once every 3 days. While miraculous and extremely interesting as to how and why these occasional moments of clarity occurred, they were offset by a significantly large quantity of times where I felt either very little effects or noteworthy negative effects. For me personally, this month was novel, useful, but not something I'm interested in making a part of my long-term routine. Since the month ended, I mini-dosed on a handful of occasions, but usually these haven't been weekends. Days when I wanted some extra pep in my step and didn't have any chance of being pulled into unexpected stressful situations. Having control over the setting of the experience seemed to alleviate many of the negatives I experienced with these small doses of LSD. Unfortunately, this simply is not possible for me in my work situation, leaving LSD as a mediocre fit into my work regimen. Very interesting. So this was just posted like literally a few days ago, and I just want to shout out the user, and I tried to find a way to get in touch with you, but I couldn't find a way, so I hope it's okay that I posted this. But Anatoly Smorin, amazing. You are my hero, and the way that you break all this down was so interesting to me, and I think this is one of the most interesting microdose reports on LSD reports I've ever read. It's shed a lot of light on both the positive and the negative effects of, a microdose or a mini dose of LSD. What I took away from it is, it does not seem like it would be good to ingest at work. And I think the setting was the worst part. I think that the idea of the mini dose is something that can be used in a much better way, in much more of like I wouldn't say recreational, but more of a creative setting. What do you guys think? I learned a lot from this. I think that it'd be very interesting if it was easy for the common individual to actually try this type of dosage out. I wouldn't know where to start. If I had a dropper and everything on my own, I still wouldn't know what the fuck to do. This is just very interesting. Like, you really have to know what you're doing to dosage this way. But I think that it'd be very crazy to see what, you know, the future holds, and if this is going to be something of the future. And if so, how can the world benefit from more people experimenting with responsible dosages of substances like this? There's so much to be learned. This makes me so excited. So, wow. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I had a lot of fun reading that. And, you know, it's funny because I was just kind of looking through trip reports to do a video on, and then I saw this one. And by the time I knew it, I was already at the end of it. I was like, wait, I forgot that I was researching for a video. So that was really interesting. I'm glad I shared it with you guys. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Please give the video a thumbs up if you enjoyed. Subscribe for more trip stories. I heard that they might be coming weekly on every Sunday now. I don't know how long that might last. You never know with this Audible 484 guy, but that's what I heard. See you guys next Sunday.